Materia Ture.
Mr Chair, I just want to briefly describe the provisions for those who may be listening, members of the public, because we talk in a language here that isn't always entirely understandable outside. So this is a provision that removes the obligation of the government to offer back to a person the land that they previously gifted or sold, gifted generally, or was had taken from them land to the government. So the offer back is when land that is taken from or gifted by an owner under the Public Works Act, and then when the Crown doesn't need that land anymore, they have a legal obligation to offer it back to the previous owner or their descendants at a market price or below the market price. Yep. So that is the property right that is being talked about here and will be taken by this provision in this bill. Now, if the previous owners or the descendants of the previous owners don't want it, then the government is entitled to be able to sell that land on the open market. So it is a right that the previous owner and their descendants will have where their land has been gifted or taken from them by the state for a particular purpose. Now, there are lots of concerns about the Māori issues that are related to that, and we will get to those shortly, but just on the general legal point. The provision in this bill, Part 2, is designed to enable government to be able to sell the land they have been gifted or that they took, provide it for developers to build houses on, and then for those developers to be able to on-sell that land with those houses on it to anyone they choose. So the offer back is prevented at both the beginning and at the end of the process with this provision. This provision is very broad. This provision does not only apply to special housing areas. It is actually much, much broader than that. This provision applies to any development for land or a number of purposes, sites, land that could have housing sites on it, land that does have housing on it, land for motorways, land for roads, access ways, for flood and river protection. So the criteria in this legislation means that the government will be able to stop its obligation to offer back land for a wide variety of purposes for which it was given. So this is not just a provision about housing. It is not just a provision about special housing areas. It will affect hundreds, if not thousands, of New Zealanders who have an offer back right. Now that is much, much broader than the narrow provisions that the rest of this bill was designed, and we've been told, is supposed to be about. The rest of this bill is supposed to be just about the special housing areas, whether you like them or not, the protection of the existing developments on special housing areas and the extension of special housing areas. But Part 2 is much, much broader than that, and it is being sneaked through this bill in urgency. And it will give the government the right to take from hundreds, if not thousands, of New Zealanders their property right to have that land offered back to them. That is a very serious incursion by the law, by the government, on the legal rights of New Zealanders, and New Zealanders who don't know that the right is being taken from them because we are dealing with this bill in urgency. So there will be most, if not all, of those who have this offer back right for land that was gifted to the Crown by them or taken from them. Those people don't know that this right is being taken from them. When we talked with the Minister and the officials, there was no evidence given to us that the people who have this offer back right have been told about this legislation, that they know that this provision is in this bill, that they have been advised of the potential risk of their property rights being taken. Not only that, but it's pretty clear that government has actually got no idea about the extent that this bill might affect New Zealanders. When we asked Nick Smith about this, he said that was he didn't think there was any issues with it. He didn't know if there were Māori interests, for example, in the offer-back provisions. He didn't know how many people... Mr Chair. Mr Chair, he didn't know the extent to which this provision would affect New Zealanders' rights. He's got no idea of the names of those people. They have done no work to make sure that the people whose rights they are taking away by law have been informed about this. Now, I have a supplementary order paper on the table to delete this provision from this bill. It needs to go. Either it goes to Select Committee so that we can at least show these New Zealanders who have gifted land to the Crown. I mean, many of these people would have gifted land to the Crown for public works. So we need to at least send this provision back to Select Committee so we can tell and talk to those New Zealanders about the gift that they made and about the potential of taking their rights for offer back from them. Or we need to get rid of it completely, because there is no justification for this provision in this bill. Now, if my colleague is correct, Grant Robertson is correct, that this is a broad provision designed to hide a specific legal threat to government, because Nick Smith has allowed developers to spend hundreds of millions of dollars building homes on land that he could not guarantee the legal authority over, right? Then we need to know that. Because if that is the case, then Nick Smith has been grossly irresponsible as a housing minister in allowing the SHAs to continue, to allow developers to invest huge amounts of money, including community organisations, allow these people to invest huge amounts of money in the building of homes and still not have legal certainty over their right to sell those homes on. That is a massive failing by a housing minister responsible for the special housing areas. He has allowed, well, this is the problem, Mr Seymour, is that Nick Smith has allowed this legal uncertainty to continue and to allow those developers to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into homes without having that legal certainty. Now, is it now right that many thousands of New Zealanders should have their property rights taken from them because Nick Smith failed to get the legal settings for the use of this land right at the first instance? That's right, with the ACT Party vote. Is that what our job is now, is to clean up the mess that Nick Smith has made in creating a potentially serious legal problem and serious financial risk for at least one, possibly a handful of developers? And he's trying to sneak through a provision to clean up his mess, relying on this Parliament to do it, doing it in urgency and doing it without telling New Zealanders what the real consequences of this bill will be. That they will lose their property rights because Nick Smith has a potential legal challenge chasing him right now. Is that what's going on? Is that what's going on? Well, of course, we don't know what's going on because Nick Smith won't give us the full information about the potential legal risk that this provision is supposed to cover. So Nick Smith is stuffed up. He's allowed all this development to continue, all this money to be spent. Those who have spent the money have no legal certainty about the nature, about their ability to sell the land that they've built on. And now Nick Smith wants us to cover it up for him. And he wants us to cover it up by taking away the property rights of thousands of other New Zealanders who have got no idea this is happening. Well, it could be hundreds, Mr Seymour. Do hundreds of people have to lose their property rights in order to cover up a mistake made by Nick Smith? Is that what you... Mr Seymour, if you want to support the cover-up of Nick Smith's financial and legal mistakes, you're entitled to do that. The Green Party will not put our name to the mix-up, to the muck-up of Nick Smith and leaving potentially developers and community organisations at genuine financial risk because he did not clarify from the beginning the legal status of that land. Now, this is why We have this provision, this SOP on the table, to delete the provision to make sure that we will protect New Zealanders' rights to their offer-back provision. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Calling out David Seymour.